The waves crash into the harbor of Sevastopol on the southern Crimean peninsula. The city was founded as a naval base in 1783 by the Russians, and since then their Black Sea Fleet has been stationed here. In 1954, Crimea was given to Ukraine by Russia, but this was during Soviet times and could be perceived merely as a symbolic gift. But after the independence of Ukraine in 1991, this became a contentious issue. Memories of the Soviet Union are kept alive in Crimea, which has a Russian-speaking majority. Next to Soviet propaganda from the old days, such as Lenin pictures in the streets, Russian flags can be found flying. On the naval base, there are upwards of 15,000 Russian military personnel, and sailors are common in the streets of Sevastopol, well liked by the citizens.
Да, они нас нормально к нам относятся. Здесь очень хорошие люди, добрые.
In the mid-1990s, the Russian nationalistic movement was strong, demanding reunification with Russia. Even today, according to polls, up to 40% of Crimean citizens favor reunification. To appease the nationalists, Crimea was given the status of a semi-autonomous republic, bound by Ukrainian law but largely self-governed. But Ukraine's ambitions to enhance their own identity have stirred up emotions and problems. Ukrainian is often the only official language used, and prescriptions written in foreign language creates problems for old people.
Там какой-нибудь на украинском.
Even though most schools teach in Russian, learning Ukrainian is mandatory.
Мне не нравится еще. Потому что мы русские. Потому что мы русские, а не хохлянские.
But most here have a more pragmatic view of the other language.
Мы живем на Украине, и нам надо знать украинский язык. Ну, вообще, чтобы поступить, ну, хорошо, там в разные вузы, и даже просто потому, что, ну, мне нравится этот язык.
Tensions over the Black Sea Fleet base have been heightened during the last few years. Ukraine is actively trying to free itself from Russian dominance and seeks EU and NATO membership. The Ukrainian fleet takes part in joint exercises and operations with NATO forces. Today, according to a treaty, Russia pays rent for the base. Ukraine has repeatedly stated that there will be no continuation of the lease after the agreement ends in April 2017. This will have a damaging effect, not just that all Russian military will be forced to leave the city by then, but also that the up to 30,000 in Sevastopol who are economically dependent on the base will lose their livelihoods.
Для них вот этот дамоклов меч нависающий, что скоро все. Здесь квартиры, здесь хозяйство, здесь быт, здесь дети в школе и так далее. И все это, вот неопределенность эта, она вносит очень мощный такой нервный отпечаток. То есть люди боятся этой даты.
The Georgia crisis this summer heightened the conflict surrounding the base when Ukraine heavily criticized the Russian incursion and also demanded to be informed of Russian ships' movements to and from Sevastopol port. It is here where many of the Russian warships that were dispatched to Georgia are stationed. There are also huge Russian investments in Sevastopol, and politicians in the Russian parliament openly discuss regaining control of the peninsula. Crimea is economically weak and receives huge subsidies from Ukraine. This fuels discontent in the rest of the country. The Russian-speaking population feels unwelcome in Ukraine, and Russia actively stirs up these sentiments. According to Sergej Kuluk, who heads an institute in Sevastopol doing research on security in the Black Sea region, 30,000 Russian passports have been issued the last 10 years to Crimeans.
Но Россия заинтересована в том, чтобы прослойка российских граждан в Крыму была достаточно большая. В таком случае Крым можно сохранять в сфере влияния Российской Федерации, и не хотелось бы думать об этом и верить в это, но в принципе в этом случае возможен такой поворот событий, как в Южной Осетии.
The Russian nationalistic movements, of course, are strongly opposed to the removal of a naval base, and Russia sends out mixed messages about their respect for Ukraine's independence.
Until August, Russia also recognized territorial integrity of Georgia. So there are some concerns in Ukraine. So if something would happen and Russia can reconsider its official position regarding territorial integrity of Ukraine, and that is one of the concerns in Ukraine.
The Russian Navy is not yet willing to enter the debate on plans for the removal of the base. There have even been threats from the Russians, according to Alexander Sushko, political researcher in Kiev.
Russia implicitly says that if Ukraine is consistent in its desire to withdraw Black Sea Fleet, it can happen something very bad in Sevastopol, some sort of destabilization.
The growing political tensions also affect normal people. In Sevastopol, relations between Russian and Ukrainian-speaking people have become strained.
Уровне. То есть, если раньше, в принципе, могли по соседству спокойно жить семьи там, украинских, российских военнослужащих, там, друг к другу в гости ходить, сейчас это уже сложнее. Уже тому же военнослужащему Черноморского флота скажут, а кому ты там в гости ходишь? Что вы там, о чем вы там говорите?
But the bond between Russia and Ukraine is still strong and has made its mark over the years. Yelena Kudryashova lives on the outskirts of Sevastopol in an area built specifically for military families during the Soviet period. Her situation is typical of many of those who live here. She is Ukrainian-speaking and her husband Yuri is Russian-speaking, but also an officer in the Ukrainian fleet. According to polls, a majority of Crimeans want friendly relations with Russia and are therefore against NATO membership for Ukraine. But not the Kudryashova family. They consider themselves foremost Ukrainians, but more pragmatically, they want to be able to finish building their house.
Мы надеемся, что если Украина войдет все-таки в НАТО, да, возможно, военным зарплаты повысят, условия жизни станут лучше, и нам будет жить, конечно, лучше.
Мы не против НАТО.
Да, мы не против. Честно говоря, мы даже этого ждем, потому что мы семья украинских военных, мы ждем улучшений, конечно.
Because of the predominance of Russian speakers, many people watch Russian TV channels that usually present the situation of the Black Sea Fleet and its base totally differently compared to Ukrainian TV channels.
Да, раз мы говорим о Севастополе, получает очень много неправильной информации. А люди знают то, что они должны знать по мнению политиков.
Часть людей, там, жителей города Севастополя, за флот, потому что у многих родственники или они сами работают в этой структуре, у кого-то служат там или дети, или мужья.
At an education center, courses are given to military officers or those who now have employment at the base. The education will lessen the problems associated with the expected redundancies.
Хуже будет, потому что 25 тысяч человек в Севастополе работают на Черноморском флоте.
Ну, вы знаете, я хочу себе найти работу, которая бы соответствовала моим, так сказать, желаниям.
Military naval officers are to receive courses in navigation, among others, to enable them to get civilian jobs once they become unemployed. The re-education is paid for by NATO.
This is a concern. First of all, 1998 already, it was a request of the Ukrainian government to assist in conquering these negative consequences.
If the economic problems for all those who are dependent upon the base are not solved, there is a huge risk that the situation could be used by the Russians to stir up instability in the Crimea.
These issues should to be addressed by Ukrainian government beforehand, maybe now or very soon. So that's a task for Ukrainian government to propose attractive model of the future for those people living in Sevastopol.
Но я считаю, что если все будет продолжаться в таком же роде, то есть какое-то нагнетание между Украиной и Россией каких-то таких напрягов, да, то в принципе гражданская война в Крыму, да, неизбежна. Но да, какой из этого выход? Москва и Киев должны разговаривать на равных и решать, да, как им жить дальше, как дружить дальше.
В следующем месяце крышу начинаем делать. Конечно же, проблема обсуждается, она актуальна, и она будет актуальна еще очень долгое время, вплоть до 2017 года, потому что мы здесь живем. Этот город — это наше будущее, это наша жизнь, это будущее наших детей, и это просто не может не волновать, как бы мы ни уставали от всех политических передряг.